Continuing on our travels, as we are down in Dublin, we have come across the river, the whole way across the river from the lighthouse.
St James's Gate. No way.
Is it St James's?
Yeah. The Guinness Storehouse is literally just there.
Oh, we'll pop in the way back. We're over to see Síle Culley and talk a bit about her work in audience design. Hello, Síle.
Hi.
Thank you for having us to your office.
Thanks for keeping me company.
We want to talk to you about your work and how you got into it and all the things that filmmakers need to think about when they're making films. I'm just going to start off by asking you how you got into this. I know you worked in distribution before, and what's been your kind of journey into ending up like running your own business with this?
Oh, good question. I suppose I first started as a production manager in film. So I graduated from DIT on Angel Street, which is now called TUD in Grange Gorman, in media arts. And I knew I wanted to be in the like hustle and bustle of making the film. Like I wanted to be part of the crew and see people every day and be in the trenches. But then I moved to the UK and realised quite soon that it was going to be very difficult to pay rent and be a freelance production manager. So I was like, oh God, do I need an office job? I think I need an office job. So I applied for an office job at a production company that I kind of heard about, but I didn't really know what the job was going to be. So I kind of blagged my way into that, and that's how I fell into distribution. Honestly, it was just I needed a steady income, and it was amazing. It was such a kind of revelation to me to understand distribution, to see what distribution is, to see how creative the process can be, but also how important it is to kind of be thinking about the end goal and like the end product and the end consumer of the film. Because you don't think about that when you're a production manager, kind of worrying about catering and trucks and actors being on time. So I loved it. I felt like it was bringing in the knowledge that I had of like how production is run and kind of what assets can be taken along the way.
Were you always just in film?
I think so. I was one of those kids.
TV wasn't something that kind of...
Well, for me, they were the same. Like when you were small and you're just kind of waking up on a Sunday morning, the rest of the household is asleep. Yeah. And you just turn on the telly. That was it for me. Whether it was film or television, I don't think it crossed my mind. I actually until quite recently. Yeah. So I was always one of those kids. I would watch Grease on a loop like 3 times before my parents woke up on a Sunday. It's my favourite film. Yeah, it's my favourite.
You must have got up very early.
It's such a good film. I never thought growing up, and even like as a teenager, that film on TV could be a job. Yeah. No, I just thought it was like chewing gum. It was just entertainment. It was fun, you know. And my granddad was an actor, but we never met. And I always know Mum spoke kind of how difficult it was for him. Like some days, you know, he'd be doing really well and he'd be on Holt's Pictorial Weekly on RTE and then have no work for a couple of months. So I suppose I didn't really think of it as, I thought of it as a hobby, maybe, not as a job.
I think that's indicative of a lot of people when they grow up, you know, it's not something that's explained to you in school.
No, absolutely. And I mean, the school that I went to was, you know, really good and fantastic, and I learned a lot and I'm very grateful. But they also were very much like geography, history, biology,
proper subjects,
philosophy, proper subjects.
No careers advice into how to work in the film business.
No, and like, I mean, yeah, sure, there was drama, but like, drama was just a way to muck around on a Friday afternoon, you know, with your pals. It wasn't actually about art or culture, and even less about kind of the commercial appeal to arts and culture. So I suppose it wasn't until I went to DIT and actually did kind of 4 years media arts to kind of understand that, yes, this is a profession. Yes, there are people who are excellent at it. No, not everyone can do cinematography. No, not everyone can direct. That I was like, I think I want to be a production manager. I think this is what I want to be. And then now I think about it, I'm like, oh, thank God I'm not a production manager anymore.
It does always seem, the hardest of all the jobs.
Hardest, and like the stress. And like the thought of waking up really early and having everyone panic call you and text you about parking and budgets and stuff like that. I'm so glad I'm away from that now. So it's kind of taken me a little while to figure out my path to kind of distribution and then to audiences. But it's been worth it because I've picked up a good few skills, I think, along the way, and network. And
absolutely. When did you move back to Ireland?
2019.
Were you drawn to kind of what was happening in the industry here? Like there was loads going on, or what was the reason to come back?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think I was only intending on being in London for a couple of years. I was like, I'll be back next year. Like, you know, don't get a new PM. I was literally telling this to producers. I was like, I'll be back next year. I'll be back next year. And then I never came back. Or it took me 8.5 years to come back. London is great and there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's also a very difficult city. Like, it's relentless.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a lot from you. It doesn't give much back. And I feel like you're operating on a level of high stress and anxiety constantly, and it just wasn't for me anymore. And I was like, you shouldn't really be living like this. Like, I'm stressed all the time. I don't see my friends, I don't see my family. So it was kind of a combination of that. And also I had stopped working at the distribution company that I was at, and I wanted to do more kind of hands-on direct support to filmmakers. I didn't know what shape that was going to take. I just knew that I didn't want to be in an office looking after someone else's kind of to-do list. I wanted to be seeing how I could support filmmakers directly on the ground, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And also the housing crisis in London was booming, so it was, cheaper here in a way.
And you moved back to Dublin. I mean, it's okay, they don't have a house for everyone.
I know.
I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, your company's called Audience Design.
So it's actually not a company. I'm still operating as a sole trader.
Right. Okay. Well, but in terms of if our listeners try to what is the process of audience design? What does it mean?
Yeah.
If a filmmaker contacts you and says, "Well, I'm interested in working with you," what are the services that you offer? What do you do?
So I help producers identify who the target audience is for their projects. That's the kind of like the big umbrella. How that looks like you say operationally, is either kind of through workshops where I read the script and all the material of the film, and we literally work through it. So we kind of start setting out maybe the themes and the keywords and the core of the story and try to understand how to better connect those with clusters of audiences. So we kind of map it out.
This is a development stage. This is very early on then.
It can be very early on. And I'd say about 70 to 80% of the projects that I work on are in late development.
Okay.
I don't come in early development because the story is still kind of being crafted and it's still taking shape. And I think it's important to kind of let the writers get on with that without stepping on their toes of being like, well, who's the audience? Or like, what's the commercial appeal of this? It's important
that inspiration is important to cherish, I suppose.
And there's like the integrity of the story is there. So like, we can't start shaping the stories we tell because of who the audience is. It has to work the other way around. It's like what the core of the story is, the integrity of the story, and let's connect that with existing audiences. Okay. So I don't come in early development, I come in at late development. But there has been a couple of examples where a film has been made, shot, edited, it's at rough cut, and they're like, oh God, what now? Because they haven't thought about it at all.
Yeah.
Right.
It's always been about, okay, I just need to get funding. Okay, now I just need to get to first day of principal photography. Okay, now I just need to get into the edit. And then when the film's been kind of, it's nearly there as an end product, they kind of panic. And they contact me. And they're like, oh Jesus, I haven't thought about the festival. I haven't thought about partners. I haven't thought about organizations or charities or, people like yourselves to kind of reach out to. So I do sometimes help on completed films as well.
Okay. I mean, I think it's really interesting. Our members often ask me, when a film gets released, who's the audience for this? Has there been much thought about that? And from sitting outside production, in the exhibition arm, I think, how would you describe it? Like a second cousin to production. Yeah. It can often seem quite kind of opaque as to who the filmmakers thought that this was going to aim at. When I was growing up, there was horror stories about, you would do screenings, audience screenings and things like that, and they would fill out a card, and then the card would say, this is the worst film that's ever been seen, and, and then the filmmakers would go, kind of throw themselves in the river or something. But it seems that actually this is quite an innovative process that you're working with filmmakers on. I mean, do you find that in UK and Ireland this isn't particularly produced, and there are other parts of Europe where this kind of thinking is much more prevalent? I suppose, where did you get the idea from?
I can't take credit for the idea at all. I did a training at the Torino Film Lab in Torino, in Turin, in 2019, actually, when I was kind of deciding to do distribution consultancy, but it wasn't enough. So I did 4 days of training in what they call audience design, which they say exactly that. It's working from the core of the story outwards and understanding how to kind of reach audiences for it. Audience design is actually a term that was coined, I think, in the 80s by an academic about essentially tweaking the language you use depending on who you talk to. So how you talk to your child, or how you talk to your parent, or how you talk to a supermarket worker will be different. So we always are constantly tweaking our messaging, our positioning, how we talk, the words we use. So it's kind of taking this idea of that plus my distribution experience to form, I suppose, this consultancy that I'm doing. As far as I know, I'm the only one in the UK and Ireland using audience design as a methodology and kind of working full time as a consultancy. I have a few colleagues in Italy and a few colleagues in Germany, but it's still very, I suppose, like you say, innovative in the sense not many people are doing this. There's actually so little people doing this that we've formed a collective of us. We're called the Audience Design Collective. You know, it's mostly going to be a members directory where there's 10 of us and there's a website to tell you how to contact us and what our specialties are. But I mean, I've been asked by, and I've travelled an awful lot this last year to different countries and different screen agencies who have taken an interest in audience design and how they can support their filmmakers from that perspective.
Yeah.
So I've done an internal workshop with the Netherlands Film Fund, for example, who were like, God, actually, we're asking these producers to think about who their audience is, but we're not supporting them in that quest,
process,
that process. So they've been in touch and like, how can they better support and how can they make it more easier for them? So it's not rocket science, and I think, you know, part of me sometimes feels like I'm scamming people.
No.
Because it's like, it's not rocket science, it's, you know, but it's a process and it's a toolbox of questions and ideation and brainstorms and discussion that comes from experience in sales and distribution. But it's just exciting to see it kind of have a moment and it becoming more and more important for different people along the film value chain and the different stakeholders as well as filmmakers.
Well, I think that, you know, filmmakers make films for people to see. You know,
not all of them do. Some of them do it for therapy.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
So the end result is they want people to see it, hopefully. Who would it be directly that would you work more with producers? Have you ever had any pushback from different parts of creative teams, or it's like, we know what we're doing, well, leave it alone? Or as a producer, obviously they'll have approached you, they kind of know what they're getting into, but is that the main person you would work with?
Yeah. It is, because I suppose they're the ones who are moving the project forward and sideways and backwards and in all types of directions. And if you think about it, they're the ones who are seeing through the film from beginning to end. So they're the ones who know the project inside out, and they're the ones who kind of know where it needs support. So they would usually tend to be the people that approach me saying like, look, we're going to market, or, you know, we need help kind of figuring out how to talk about this project and how to kind of even talk about who we think the film is for. So it's a very agile process, and that's the thing as well. You know, we set out maybe in development and we figure it out, but that is a fluid thing. We adapt it and we change it, and, you know, partners come on board and they have their opinion or they have their experience.
Each project is different.
Each project is different. I always say, like, each film is a prototype, so we can't cookie cut the same answers or the same audience answers, the same
time. So reactive to all
so reactive,
And collective teams must be so unique as well in terms of just the mix of people who come together to make a film.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's been a couple of instances where I've kind of worked with the same producer but on different kind of projects or with different teams, and you can definitely tell, you know, which ones are the trickier ones in terms of, like, you know, maybe the director's less open to it because it's a very personal story, or because, you know, who's this random person coming in and telling me what to do? And I don't come in and tell people what to do, but there is a sense of kind of vulnerability as a director of having...
Yeah, people are protective of
They are, and, you know, it's fair enough. It's taken them quite a long time, or maybe quite a lot of energy to get to the point where they have. So I kind of understand that sometimes there's a little bit of reluctance from directors maybe, or from writers, but usually the producers that I work with are so open to the process, and to be honest, so thankful to have kind of fresh eyes and a fresh brain on their project. And I'm not a threat. That's the thing I've realized over the last years. Like, I'm not a funder. I'm not a sales agent, I'm not a distributor, and I'm not an exhibitor.
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
terms of like, you know,
There's no hidden agenda.
there's no hidden
Yeah.
agenda, and they're very open then about, I need help with this, or can you explain this to me, or how would we figure this out? Because I'm not going to jeopardize any chances that they have with anyone in the value chain. If anything, I actually understand what the funder needs. I understand what the sales and the distribution need. And, you know, I did a little stint in programming, so I kind of understand how difficult it is to kind of sell stuff then to exhibitions. So I think I've just found that there's a good little niche for me
Yeah.
where I'm not anyone's competition or threat. I'm really just there to kind of support and elevate what they're wanting to say about their film.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant the work you do. What, this might be a hard question, what has been like one of the most favourite projects you've worked on?
Oh my God. I have to sign NDAs, so
You can't
yeah, I don't know.
all of the ones you had to sign NDAs for.
Oh, it's very different because, I mean, I've only been doing this for 4 years and COVID happened in the middle of that. So it's quite hard to do workshops in person when you're confining. So there was a lot of Zoom calls and script notes and application notes. So if you think I've only been doing this for 4 years, the amount of projects I've consulted on that actually haven't even yet made it out into you know, I think in 2 years' time I'll probably have a different answer to this. I don't know. I'm very fond of the films that I've consulted on that, you know, have premiered in Venice or Toronto because it feels like they're real tangible and it wasn't just me and the producer saying, this is a great film.
Yeah.
You know, it actually has kind of come true.
I'll ask you in a couple of years.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
ask you in a couple of years.
I'll see when the NDAs run.
Yeah. Wait till they run out. Yeah.
But it is really interesting from our perspective in terms of, you know, kind of we're always trying to, you know, from a programmer's perspective, for example, that somebody is doing this kind of work at the back end of a film, front end of a film, I suppose. And I suppose in terms of when you talk to filmmakers, is there an objective, well, I'd like to see this in exhibition, I'd like to see this in cinema, or people are saying, well, look, we're making this film ready to go up onto TV, or, you know, that sort of thing. Is there an awareness of platform, I suppose, in this process?
They all want the cinema screen.
Yeah.
They all want it.
Is that because of the value of cinema, the kind of the prestige, I suppose?
It's the prestige and it's also just the ambition. You know, why set out, especially if you're going to be in development, this is how they're thinking, why set out to make film for a platform?
Yeah.
You know, no, I want this to be in Cannes. I want this to be, you know, in 200 prints in France, and I want this to be on every Dublin bus in Ireland. You know? And I think it's important to have that ambition, and I think it's important to kind of have that goal. But a lot of the work as well is kind of bringing it back down to reality and understanding, okay, well, this is the current market, and this is kind of the current, I suppose, partner list that you could collaborate with, and realistically, what's going to be the outcome if you go down that path or that path. But there is still a huge drive for the cinema screen. There is. No one's saying, oh, I'd love to make a film for Sky Cinema.
Yeah.
You know that? I'd love to make a film for Netflix that they just hide on the platform and no one gets to see. Everyone is still striving for that cinema screen, and I can understand it because it is, I think, you know, the most exciting.
Absolutely. And all these stories about the death of cinema, the death of cinema, the death of yeah, we're still going. Numbers are still high, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's that sort of value as well in terms of where people put their product, or whether, you know, I mean, the kind of producers you're working with are obviously taking the story very seriously, you know, in terms of the story and who the audience and who they want to see it, because they want to have the greatest impact on what they do. And there is sort of a sense often that, you know, people are just throwing films out and it doesn't really matter. But even if you look at kind of straight to video, they know that they're straight to video and they're going to get that kind of audience. But when you break down an audience, are you talking in marketing terms? So when you say things like, you know, this will be a class A1 person will see it, or will it be like kind of, you know, will it be ethnic minority audience, or will it be culturally a different audience? How do you create that kind of wheel of society, I suppose? You know, do you say, well, this will be for older people, 65 plus, or, you know, is that the kind of process you're going through?
Yes. So I try and kind of stay away from hard demographics that, because I think, you know, and I do this sometimes. I get a room full of people and I put up statements on the PowerPoint and I say, you know, I have 4+ subscriptions of VODs at home, and then I get people to stand up if they agree and sit if they disagree. I have different statements, and it's really interesting to see who stands and who sits. And I suppose the moral of the story, or what I say at the end as a conclusion, is like, see how different we all are, but you see how, according to demographics, some of us would be bunched together, yet we have such different tastes. And so that's why I stay away from demographics and focus on psychographics.
Okay.
So I'm more interested in kind of how can we talk about the audience in terms of their lifestyle and their behavior and how they spend their spare time and who they go to the cinema with and what do they watch at home. And so yes, demographics, because I think it's still kind of important for marketing terms and digital agencies and marketing agencies to kind of consider that. I want filmmakers to think about their audiences as real people and to think about the shoes that they're walking in and how they're going to make that decision to go and see your film, either in the cinema or at home, and what's going to push that decision. What is it that you're going to put forward in terms of visual identity? What is it that you're going to put forward in terms of genre or keywords or themes in your story that's going to make them go, do you know what, actually I will watch that, that sounds really interesting. Or Mary told me about that at Zumba, and sure, I trust Mary. So you know, okay, well actually there's going to be a strong word of mouth process within our little personas of that film. So you actually just come up with lots of different personas, imaginary people in your head to try and carve out who that audience is for them.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that relationship with Mary withstands the recommendation to go and see that film. I've lost a couple of good friends down the years. Where I've
I can't go to
them.
Zumba anymore, can
No,
you?
I can never show my face again in Zumba. But yeah, no, I think that is really interesting that it's not, hard demographics are often our trade and how we kind of think about things, in terms of class, in terms of ethnic makeup and things like that. But there is a sense of, I think that this is something that's shared also by cinemas and venues. And festivals to a certain extent, but certainly cinemas and venues. There was our colleagues at Film Up Midlands put together a thing which was called Cinema Know-How, which is about 7 or 8 years ago. And it was really interesting that, they would do audience journey, actual physical audience journey.
Cool.
So if you live in one part of town, how are you actually going to get to the cinema? How are you, all those kind of things. Do you take a bus? Well, if you take a bus, you have to do all these kind of different things and stuff like that. And it was to make venues think about individual journeys and sort of beyond just a box office number, and beyond that sort of thing. And I think it's a really interesting way. Psychographics. That's
Psychographics.
And
the other thing I always, I say is like, what are your goals with the film? Like, what are your intentions, and how are you going to define success for what the film is to you? Because okay, we start the workshop and everyone wants to go to Cannes, but by the end of it, some of them go, actually, do you know what? This isn't a Cannes film. Why are we trying to chase something that we don't want? So I think part of the process as well in audience design is really understanding, are your resources and your timeline and your plan of action supporting the goals that you have for the project, or are you just going along with what you think is expected of the project? And those are two very different things, and one of them is heartbreak and the other one is hooray, you know? And so defining success is really important, and like what you were saying there, kind of, user journey is also important as part of that process, part of that method. One of the things that's really important is to never, and what I'm saying this is like, you surround yourself with good collaborators, with the right partners that you've done your research on, that you've had a conversation with, and that you gel with. Audience design is never intended to replace the process of distribution or of sales or even festival strategy or exhibition or understanding actually who the end consumer is. We're so far upstream that it can only ever support the film as it goes through the different processes. It's not going to replace all these other partners, but it might make you better prepared, or it might make you more confident, or in those conversations that you have. And the idea is that we all kind of, it sounds so cheesy, but that we all do come together and share and collaborate rather than keep things closed,
siloed,
and competitive. Like, how is competition helping an economy when we're all in it together and our audience is, we're all looking down at the same thing, which is the audience?
Yeah, and I think it's especially important for kind of up and coming filmmakers to understand that process. If you're looking at a festival strategy, to do the work to find the right festival. Festivals are really expensive. If you want to, I'm gonna enter them all. You can spend thousands. So having as much information about film and how to sell your film on Film Freeway or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is really important,
Yeah.
I think. Would you do a lot of work with younger filmmakers or upcoming filmmakers, like workshops or anything?
So I think when I started out, I was very much like, I'm for the emerging filmmakers. I'm for the debut and the second features. But actually, it's realistically, I mean, I probably could continue that way, but there's still people contacting me who have a lot of experience and,
Yeah.
you know, have been nominated for Oscars, who are still kind of trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because it's such a moving part. And I think the producer's job is becoming more and more complicated in a way. There's a lot more being
Audiences
asked
change all the time.
Yeah.
all the time.
I mean, the audiences before COVID and after COVID are two totally different.
And I'm
beasts.
still getting to grips with it,
Yeah.
you know? So imagine a producer who's trying to handle a slate of their projects and different sources of funding for development, for production, packaging, you know. More and more is being asked of these producers, and rightly so, because it is public money, you know, it is public funding, so they have to think about who that end consumer is and who the audience is. But so I'm supporting people of all, I suppose, experience and all kind of caliber of film and all genre. And I've done a couple of TV series now as well, because I think they're finding it's like, well, it's not even as clear as it used to be. The broadcasters are not taking this sort of content. So now I'm thinking about going to streaming, but it's still episodic. But then,
Yeah.
you know, the conversation and the process is still the same. So it started very narrow and now it's kind of gone all over the gap.
But
Yeah.
people obviously see the value in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
But obviously,
so.
it's a growth area.
Yeah.
I mean, we certainly are very interested, you know, from a cinema perspective, and behind members, because we're obviously the end or the sort of last bit of the picture, and I think it's very interesting about, you know, getting exhibitors to think in this way as well about, you know, when you're programming who are the audience you're thinking of reaching out for. And a lot of people know it instinctively just through experience, you know, that'll play well this, so that's or this will play well in that venue. Distributors know those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I think the more thinking that goes on right through the chain, the better. I suppose.
Exactly.
So it's fascinating. It's really fascinating to sort of hear those kind of that kind of process is going on. Yeah.
Do you ever wish you were coming in early in the film's journey?
Yes.
Really?
Well, she does.
I do. Yes.
I have to be involved with actors, and that couldn't, you know.
Yeah, no, I have always, not always thought, but, you know, over the last while, having worked with more filmmakers and distributors and stuff that we're doing, that actually, yeah, you know, there's coming in as early as possible and understand your audience can only be beneficial to everyone, but it's very hard to get that kind of
Access.
the access, exactly. You know, we have still would get experienced producers coming and asking us how, you know, how do you get a run in the cinema, whatever, you know, like, you know.
And we have tended to concentrate on younger audiences and
Yeah.
students and trainees and those kind of things to kind of give them the sense that, you know, your final audience is really key to thinking about this process. It's not your number one priority. Obviously, your number one priority is get the film made and get through that. But, you know, it is an important part of making a success of the film. Who is going to watch this? How are they going to watch it? And why are they going to watch it? And it seems to us, you know, so it seems to us from an exhibition perspective, there's a lot of simpatico.
Synergy,
Synergy, you know,
symbiosis.
all those terrible words with the work that you did. So
Yeah.
that's why it's fascinating to
Yeah.
hear about more detail about it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
And I suppose there's two sides of a coin for me. I talk about kind of two audiences when I talk to the producers. I'm like, there's your first audience, which are the funders and the sales agents and the distributors.
Yeah.
You know, it's the market. So how you talk to them about your project, why you're making it, why now, you know, all those classic questions. That requires a lot of work, and that can be really intimidating. And then on the flip side, it's like, oh Jesus, but we actually need people to buy tickets
Yeah,
to this,
yeah.
you know? And so it's helping them with that consumer audience as well. And whilst I thought it would be, you know, what you do on the consumer side, I'm finding that more and more need help as well with the market audience side.
Yeah.
It is very confusing.
It's so confusing and it's intimidating and it's overwhelming and it shouldn't have to be, because we all need each other.
Yeah.
You know, the sales agents need the producers as much as each other.
It's
And
about
same-
building confidence and all that.
that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Just one last question. What's next for you then? Where are you heading off to? Anywhere
God.
fancy? You're just back from Berlin.
I'm just back from Berlin, which was a great Berlin. It was a great buzz about. I'm here for a couple of weeks and then I've lined up workshops in Australia and in Sweden and I'm forgetting where else. I might return to Brazil, hopefully.
Sure, why not?
Why not? Yeah, but it's great. It's really nice to kind of go to. I mean, I'm very, very lucky and appreciative, and I feel so bad for, my carbon emission, and I will plant some trees.
I'm sitting beside a plant.
I know the plant. Yeah, the plant is
It's
great.
great.
Yeah. But I know I feel very thankful and very grateful to have the opportunity to travel, but to also kind of pick up on the sensitivities of like Brazilian film and Swedish film, and
Yeah.
actually kind of seeing it from that perspective, in their hometown and how they talk about it, and then how it comes to kind of to us.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I'm learning a lot, and I love it. It's really, really fun.
Well, I mean, out of all the people that we've interviewed, that's the most glamorous life.
Oh no, stop! You'll have to cut this bit out. No, I sound like such a
No,
white girl.
but it's great to hear these innovative ideas being taken up and working and stuff, and hopefully that will happen, more and more as time goes on. So we're really grateful for your
Yeah,
time.
thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We'll come back to you in 2 years.
Listen, I'm so sorry. I'll come up with a list and I'll send it to you. Podcast notes.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.